Hey everyone, Cell here. As the league started to die down, I decided to finish off my first Mageblood in solo self-found standard, and having done so, as you can see in the background footage, I decided to talk about some of my thoughts on the process as a whole and whether I think you should farm one for yourself in solo self-found or not. The short answer may surprise you in that it's going to be no, unless you play a lot. I'll get into that more in a second, but general strategy for me was pretty typical. It was to run an enraged strongbox strategy, helped out greatly by the new 7th Gate Keystone this league. So I had a bunch of supplies in standard, a bunch of sextants ready to go, and a bunch of scarabs and all that jazz. So the juice, not winged scarabs, but the full suite of gilded. And it still took me quite a while to finish out my last card. I had 4 out of 5 because I gambled one away. Also, little side note there, never gamble because I would have been done and not had to have done this if I didn't gamble the one away. But generally, I would say it was quite a grind, which is not surprising to pretty much anybody, I don't think. So, in game now, this is the character I ended up running the farm with. Got some legacy gear here from, various things. The bow is technically legacy now because it's a crucible bow with some pretty ridiculous mods on it. The tier 1, or the highest ranking, I believe, flat elemental damage at tier 1 here, and then the attack speed less damage at tier 2. This bow's pretty insane. It was a bit worse than this. I recrafted it when I got to standard. Made it about 15% better than it was, and it was already the best, I think, weapon I've ever created in Crucible, so there's that. Prioritized quantity over rarity. Didn't really get a lot of rarity because I was really only focused on getting the card to drop. So perfect quantity on 1 Ventor's, Goldworm, Greed's Embrace, and I have a Legacy 15% quantity Sidium's Touch. Now, apart from the mathematical diminishing returns, GGG does a hard enforced diminishing returns, so like 60% here is not going to be that big of a difference between like 20% because of how hard it drops off. But, I was wearing the items anyways, and I could do the maps, so stack as much as you can comfortably. So that's what I did. And I ended up running about 100-ish, 100-something maps for the last card, which wouldn't normally feel bad, but did this time just because of the quantity of other rare cards I was getting. So we're talking about 7 Years Bad Luck, the Enlightened, etc. All of those cards I got about 2 to 2.5 times the amount you would expect for 1 Apothecary, and it was pretty rough, and it took me about a week. Obviously I have like a job and stuff, so I wasn't playing like 12-hour days or anything during that week. And when I say week, it was like 4 or 5 days. Just, after work during the weekday. And I already had the supplies prepped, or it would have been slower otherwise. So, like I said, I was running. Actually, I think I might still have. Yes. This is the tree I ended up on. It was like a hybrid box and ghosting strategy that people have been running. So I did make a second character, but for the first. I only ran like 20 maps with this exact tree. All the rest did not include the ghosts. So that's partially on me, like I should have done it from the beginning, but I was mostly trying to brute force with the stuff I had prepped, and I didn't want to take on a whole new strategy or anything like that. So I eventually decided I started doing Abyss and other league mechanics, so I just went with Ghosts and tried that out, and it went pretty well. I won't talk about that too much. I have a suspicion it'll get nerfed next league, and if it doesn't, then I would still recommend doing it, of course. And the biggest bottleneck I found was going to be sextants. So I came into standard with a bunch of sextants already prepped, and had, let's see, probably like between 40 and 60 maps worth of the Enrage Strongbox Sextant all ready to go. And then I had about 1,300 sextants that I used, ran those down. It's about 1 in 80 if you block properly to get the Enraged Strongbox Sextant, and that's the rarest one, so everything else should fall in line on average. In that, if a sextant is 1 in 60-ish, you should have more of that than the Enraged Strongbox Sextant on average. So again, kind of a bottleneck there, but not just in terms of the sextants. In terms of the overall supplies, now I am a little bit skewed because I have supplies from previous leagues in here. I have other remove-only tabs as well that haven't been merged in, so my perception may be a little skewed there, but I would definitely, if you are thinking about doing this yourself, farming some winged scarabs, if the current league mechanic or metagame at the time is not leaning towards being good for winged scarabs, you can always do Betrayal, and that's pretty solid, and I would recommend that because I think the sextants are going to be a big enough bottleneck that you want to go as hard as you can, and winged scarabs are 60% better than gilded divination scarabs. So pretty big multiplier in that sense. Apart from that, just generally having a character that can be comfortable running as many map mods as possible is good. This character can run any map mod, including Reflect. Reflect is the only one you need to swap anything for, like you can use a Reflect Sextant or some gear swap, Pantheon swap, that sort of deal. But most of the time I didn't have enough Reflect 8 mod maps that I felt like I needed to run them. So I just ran the other ones instead, and you can do like a manual prep of chiseling, alching, corrupting your maps, or you can run an 8 mod sextant if you get any of those. Again, the biggest bottleneck is going to be sextants and then scarabs behind that. Everything else is pretty easy to come by, like chisels. If you really need to, you can get a ton of chisels through various means. You should have enough like alks and scours and vol orbs and all that jazz. And if you're ever short on any of those, you can do some Exarch farming, minion altar farming, that is. And that's a good source of awakened sextants as well, so you can get that simultaneously. Now, the reason I would suggest against farming a Mageblood in solo self-found is if you are a strictly league player. I will most likely be playing some standard for various reasons in the future, and so I wanted to farm one specifically for that reason. It is a big time commitment to farm a Mageblood. I think everybody knows that, but I want to reiterate, as someone who plays this game way too much, it is too big of a time commitment for me to do that every league, or even like one league a year. It's that big of a grind on average. Now, if you know you're never going to play standard, you could always gamble if you get cards. I wouldn't suggest it unless you get one, again, completely randomly, and you have no intention of ever setting foot in a Crimson Temple map again. Then one card, if you harvest gamble, is equivalent to a 20% chance to get a Mageblood. So, decent odds, all things considered. If you don't plan on playing standard or finishing out the set in the league, then you have a 20% chance to get a Mageblood instead of a 100% chance to not have a Mageblood, if that makes sense. So that is the only instance in which I would gamble. Don't be like me, where last league I gambled one card in standard because I said, well, if I get it in standard, if I gamble it up in standard, then I just won't farm it in the league. Well then, I only got 3 cards in the league because I quit to do other stuff, and I would have been done 5 out of 5 in standard, but I was only 4 out of 5 because I gambled one away. So, yeah, that's kind of the split there. If you're going to intentionally farm it, I think it's fun to do once. I will admit that. I had a blast farming for Mageblood in or farming apothecary cards in Crucible League. And I might do the same for Headhunter. It's a little different. I'll get into that in a second as well. But I probably wouldn't do apothecary farming again because I feel like the benefit you would get out of it does not outweigh the time it takes to get it. If you're getting a Mageblood 2 months into a 3-month league, or even a 4-month league, are you going to have the willpower to play after that point and effectively utilize the Mageblood for whatever you wanted it for? Personally, I don't think I would, even though I play a lot. Like even now, I'm playing the game. A few months into the league here, with some events coming up. And I'm saying I don't think I would be using it in the current league. Standard is a little different, of course, because it's a permanent league, so you can always come back to it. And that's what I plan on doing. The league dies down, or I want to do some crazy farm, long-term type stuff. I'm glad to have the Mageblood in Standard. Now, a big reason I suggest against farming it in League is the variance. So, I went slightly, I won't say super unlucky or anything, but slightly unlucky to the point of being a little unnerving on my last card. Now, I could have gone way unluckier. I could have gone twice as long and still not gotten the last card. That is very demoralizing in the context of a league. And so, if I do another card-based farm in the future, it will be for Headhunter, specifically for the Patient. Because the Patient is so much more common, I would much rather farm out a card with lower variance, even if it takes longer on average. I don't know that it would, but just, theoretically, if it did, I would still be more comfortable with that because it's a more consistent card that'll be dropping, and that's just something I prefer personally. Seeing the number tick up, seeing that you're making actual progress, and not just doing dozens and dozens of super juiced maps, or even moderately juiced maps, hoping that the card eventually drops. Speaking of that, I guess one more tip would be, if you do this farm and you're trying things out and you want to try different strategies, I think people know this by now, but definitely track the amount of a more common card you're getting for a particular strategy. So when you farm a card, you want to know that more cards in general are dropping. And so to verify that, pick up a card like Lingering Remnants or the Gambler, and between the various strategies, track how many you're getting. And obviously you got to do more than one map. You can't do a map and be like, oh, I only got 3 Gambler cards that map. I need to try a different strategy. And the next one drops 4. And you're like, oh yeah, that's way better. No, you got to do at least a few dozen decent maps, but more ideally 100 or so. And then decide, whether you like the strategy, the supplies it uses, etc., against the amount of cards that are dropping. Because at the end of the day, this is a test of macro efficiency if you're doing it in solo self-found. You can't just blow through all of the supplies you have like I was doing on Standard, hoping that one day you get it, because eventually you are likely to run out, and then you'll have to spend time getting more supplies. So making effective use of supplies is important as well. And as always, in a game where there are no particularly finite resources, in the context of a league, you can always go and get more of a thing. It might be extremely rare or unlikely to do so, but it's possible at least. And especially when it comes to common things, the currency, so to speak, you should be looking at is your time. If something is going to... If you don't chase jackpot strategies is what I'm getting at, essentially. Unless you know for sure that you're not going to get burned by missing the big hit. Anyways, that is about it for what I wanted to cover in this video, I think. And since I realized I hadn't done this, I'm going to turn in my Oh, almost got you there, right? No, probably not. Turn in my 7 years bad luck for some mirror shards. This is kind of surreal. I mean, this is standard, so I've literally never had a mirror shard. 3/20ths of a mirror in solo self-found. Maybe as one of those aforementioned long-term goals, I can go for a full mirror and possibly pick up some other Magebloods along the way now that I have one in my arsenal and can put some different builds together. Subscribe if you want to find out, and I'll catch you at some point in the future. Peace.